now you're talking directly to somebody. When they show up on your website, their shoulders can relax and say, ah, this is for me. So I couldn't resist just kind of sharing that in case it helps people. I don't know if you're having, I'm sure your hamster's turning out thoughts as I was talking. Hey, everybody, this is Eddie Babbage, founder, CEO of Timeline Genius, your host here of the Wedding Industry Insider Podcast, back with another great episode to help fuel you and your business. I'm here with Emily Foster. She is the owner of Emily Foster Design, which is a branding and website design studio based in Portland, Oregon. She's got about 8 years of design experience, launched her company a few years ago, and we are going to get into some very juicy and I think productive, valuable topics here, talking about brand strategy, website design, and other good stuff. But Emily, let me just say thank you for taking time to do this. I'm really excited to have you on the show.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks so much for having me, Eddie.
Absolutely. So, just to go a little bit more into your background, Emily, can you just give people just the sort of overview of your experience and your background and what led you to the place where you currently are professionally?
Yeah, so we could go way back. I'll just start kind of like college time frame. I originally thought I was going to go into business, which I guess I ended up doing because I now own my own business. But I was thinking more like the corporate side of marketing, like working at Nike, that kind of thing. And I went to Nike school, actually, like University of Oregon, where it was started. So that was my whole plan. And then kind of started going down the route of more of the art side of things. I had been in yearbook and always had fun a lot with artistic things. So my whole like college education was a combination of artistic kind of learning and then strategy in business, and minored in business and studied like marketing and advertising and the strategy side of things first, and then took a bunch of design classes and like digital media and things like that. So I went into my career really with a more strategic mindset about things versus kind of being your traditional art school designer, which I think really helped now that I own my own business and help people with their brand strategy, because I'm always looking at things from more of a strategic standpoint versus just like the trendy, artistic kind of visual standpoint, and thinking about how can every decision that we make actually lead back to the strategy. So I got some experience in marketing agencies, did a lot of different things in like startups and marketing agencies on the ground, and actually used to work in events too. I worked for an event marketing agency where I was the designer, but at some points I was also at the event selling tickets, helping to plan the events, doing a lot more of the logistics and things like that, which turned out to be so valuable. And also kind of, I say that I was a wannabe wedding planner or even wedding photographer. I filmed a wedding in college, and at one point I remember going up to a professor and saying, I think I want to be an event planner. And I think they just didn't have the kind of education to equip people to be event planners in that program. It was advertising. So it kind of all came together a few years ago when I was laid off because of COVID and working for an event agency, and decided to pivot and start my own studio and be able to work with small businesses full time. I'm so glad I haven't looked back, because working with small businesses has been so rewarding. And there's just something so different about being able to really bring your personality out and help you grow the business that you are so connected to. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm helping small business owners, mostly creatives and wedding pros, stand out and shine their personality through their brand and build that into their website too, so that they can feel empowered to show up as their best selves to their most ideal clients.
Wow, I love that. That was very well stated. And as you're talking, um, I feel like, and this always kind of is in my mind in the pre-interview, I believe that we all have our unique talents, right? And none of us has the time or even, just natural inclinations to be an expert at everything, right?
Mhm.
And I think we can all learn so much from other people. Your superpowers are not mine, and vice versa. And as you're talking, and even as we were doing the pre-interview, I'm just like, marketing, branding, these things are so important. And the people listening, like our wedding professionals right now, like our planners, they're out there like, their craft is doing what you thought about doing, like that's what they do day in and day out. But as you also stated, you own a business as a wedding planner, so you're a business owner. You can be a designer, but if you own a business, you're a business owner, and that a very big chunk of your success is going to be driven by that. And a big part of business is marketing. So, really excited to kind of get into these topics and to help you share your expertise and superpowers to help people.
Thank you.
A couple of quick background questions just to go a little further. I say this as an entrepreneur myself, like what was it that in those early days drew you to business?
Yeah, I can't lie and say that it wasn't the flexibility and freedom. I feel like for all of us, that's a huge core. I didn't realize it until post college because I feel like when you're studying what you're meant to do, you're just on such a path most of the time. Like most college programs aren't teaching you to be an entrepreneur. So you're just on this path of like, great, I'll fit into the mold. I'll be okay with like 2 weeks PTO and building my career. And when I was looking down that path, it just didn't feel aligned. And I couldn't figure out why because I personally didn't have a lot of entrepreneurs growing up in my life.
Right,
So it wasn't something that I had normalized. And I'm like, why can't I fit into this mold where I don't necessarily want to work for 50 years to get to maybe 6 figures and still only have like 2 or 3 weeks off a year? Like, I saw a lot more value in being able to spend more time with my family, being able to travel, things like that. So there was that aspect. And then I was thinking of it actually earlier when you were talking about how, yeah, you're a wedding planner and you're also a business owner. And I think a lot of us have in common that we're multi passionate. And unless you're at a startup or like a small agency, it's often hard for those multi passionate qualities to show up in more of like a corporate 9 to 5 job. So I think entrepreneurship really has allowed me to be multi passionate. Of course, we still have that main focus. Like probably about 75 to 80% of the time in my business, I still need to show up as a designer, like brand strategist, doing the client work. But it's really awesome to be able to have like different ventures and different kinds of projects that we can work on. So that's something that really drew me to entrepreneurship too. I would say the balance and flexibility, the small business partnerships that I was talking about earlier, being able to really feel like I was making a difference in a business. I used to work with really big brands, and that was really fun. But there's just a certain aspect when you're just like a little bit of a cog in a wheel and not really feeling like you're helping the business that much. Like you're just kind of keeping things going for them. So that hands on experience with small business owners, and then also the opportunity to be multi passionate and do that every day.
love that. Very, very cool. Yeah, I feel like that's the sort of thread that connects us all. And I was never have been a wedding planner. I've learned a lot about wedding planning over the last 10 years just by serving, all the incredible wedding planners in our Timeline Genius community. But the thing that I do share with almost everybody in our audience, with you, is just like that business connection. And
Mm.
um, yeah, and that's what, as I told you in the pre-interview, I always want to kind of get into like what can we give somebody that's concrete that's going to help them in their business after they've invested like an hour or so to listen to a podcast. And to kind of tee up the question and really the sort of focal point of this interview, there was a question that came to mind, and I've posed it, with other guests as well. I said, Emily, if I came to you and I'm like, I've been a wedding planner for the last few years, I've got some clients coming, it's tough, the job is stressful, I'm balancing like work life and trying to make more profits. I'm worried, every year I have to start fresh in terms of there's no guarantee that I'm going to get the bookings that I want, like just the
Mm.
stresses and pressures of trying to build and grow a business. And I said, if you had 1 hour to sit down and talk with me to help me as much as you could, um, what would we talk about? And you said, I'd help you get clear on your ideal client, and we'd segue from there into brand strategy. So let's start to unpack that a little bit.
Yeah.
Talk to me about what is an ideal client? Why is it important? Let's start with those two questions. What is an ideal client, and why is it so important to you?
Yeah, an ideal client, I feel like there's just a few different definitions. And I think people make the mistake of only kind of latching onto one. I actually had a call with a wedding photographer a little while back, and she's like, well, I know who my ideal client is. Like, it's this type of wedding and they're willing to pay this much. And I'm like, that it's not that simple. So that is a huge part of finding your ideal client, is making sure they're the sector of the market that will actually pay you for the quality of your work. But I like to say it's the person that you most align with and that you want to work with every single day. So if you think of the most favorite client that you've had in the past, or there's maybe an inquiry that you've had and you're like, oh, I would have loved to work with them, that's perfect. It would be having that person over and over again, because
What a
in
great definition.
reality, we'll still have, there will be little blips. Like, even when you're attracting your most ideal client all the time, you'll still sometimes attract someone who maybe isn't the greatest fit for a different reason. But in a perfect world, we would just be working with our ideal client all the time. And it would be that person who really gives you joy in your business and reminds you, like, this is why you're doing it. Because I would say, one, they're paying you what you're worth. And let's take a step back, not what you're worth, what your services are worth, because you're worth
Right.
like millions of dollars. So, um, they're paying what your services are worth and like the quality of that. They trust you as the expert to do what it is that makes you stand out as a wedding planner, or other wedding pro. And then they also allow you to do the kind of style that you want and perform that. And I would say, going back to that step two, like having someone who really trusts you, no matter what you're doing exactly, like what kind of wedding planner you are, what your style is, or your price, like that's the key, I think, in your ideal client, because that's how you're going to show up best and do your best work over and over again.
I like that definition, Emily, because it's a very sort of high level or just kind of pierces right to the core because it subsumes all the other stuff, right? Like the person
Mhm.
that you really want to work with, like that means that they're paying you, for the value of your services, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't have
Mhm.
to. Just like as I kind of reflect and even think about our ideal client, profile with Timeline Genius, like that's it. It's the person you're like, oh, as soon as you're talking to them, you're like, bing, like bullseye. Yes. What do
Yeah.
you say, in terms of the importance of nailing that down? Because I know, and I've talked about this a little, I won't go super deep down the rabbit hole because I've had, other conversations about like ideal client, but like I know that even despite the fact that we've talked about it on past episodes, webinars, etc., there's still, I'm sure, people listening, and I was guilty of this myself. I've had three businesses, and if I'm honest, this business is the only one where I really sat down. I was like, marketing, schmarketing, ideal client, whatever. I know who we're going to, whatever, but like, no, really sat down and built out that like very granular, detailed profile of who our bullseye ideal client is. Like, why is that important? Because I know some people still haven't done that exercise.
Yeah, I think that you can tell the difference between someone who's at the beginner stage of finding their ideal client and who has found it by the way that they're speaking, in their brand and website. And it's shifting from I, and this is what I have to offer to you, versus this is who you are, I see you, and this is how we show up in your story.
Yeah.
So I think finding your ideal client, comes down to the emotions. I think it's so easy to get carried away into like, okay, they're this old, they are going to pay me this much. Maybe their parents are paying for the wedding and they have this budget and they go to Target and they drink iced coffee every day. Like, that's great, but understanding the emotions of like, why are they booking a wedding planner?
Yeah.
Why me over someone else who maybe is cheaper in the industry? Like, why would they love my style? What are they stressing about? I have this like client archetype workbook that I work with people through my brand strategy calls. And one of the questions that I think always kind of takes people off guard is like asking them, what kind of stressors are they experiencing in their life outside of the wedding? Like, are they having like financial stress? Do they kind of like have tension with their parents? Like, kind of trying to imagine that. Obviously, you can't do like a blanket statement for everyone, but we're writing a persona about one person and thinking about like what's going on in their head outside of just what you're offering. And I think that's a huge influence. Does that answer the question
Really?
completely?
Yeah, no, it totally does, Emily. And I think, and I've alluded to some of this before, but I just want to share for folks. I mean, this is obviously your interview, but I can't help but like just kind of share my experience on this because again, our first two companies, I didn't really go as deeply down this sort of rabbit hole. For this one, we have named our avatar Wendy Wedding Planner, right? And it's
I love
Timeline
that.
Genius. We have our, wedding day timeline software. I'll speak a little bit more to that, but this is just completely for the benefit of anybody listening. You're running your business, and to frame the importance of what you're talking about here, Emily. So, Timeline Genius, we have venues that use our software, we have event planners, we have photographers. And when we first launched, it's like, wow, it's not even just weddings. Some people are using it for corporate events. And I had this fear, and I'll bet you've seen it before. And I know that planners listening, wedding pros listening right now, you have this fear like, well, if I start focusing on one really narrow segment of the market, I'm going to be missing all this other potential business. And I'm scared. My problem is I'm worried to begin with that I'm not going to get the business. So when we were launching Timeline Genius, the branding, the positioning, for those that remember like 2015, what the website looked like we were very carefully trying to speak to the whole event industry, right? Like the new standard in event day timelines. What happened over time is we learned, wait a minute, if you're talking to everybody, you're talking to nobody.
Mhm.
And we got really clear, like, I know the people. And again, this doesn't mean, and you correct me if you see this differently, having an ideal client for us, it doesn't mean that's the only person we actually serve. No, of course we have people. And first of all, it's an abstract idea to begin with. Like it's like a composite. It's not like it's an actual like everybody's different, so it's never going to be, but we know, to kind of speak to what you're saying, it's not demographics. Like you show me a wedding planner who's like, I'm full time. I do 15 plus events a year. My time is really valuable to me. I'm willing to make an investment to save time. Like there are all these things like, oh, if you're doing 3 events a year, we can help you. But even if we save you a ton of time, we're only saving you on three. If you're doing 20 events a year, like, when you're talking to that person, that is like you're saying, like the lights are, I'm like, oh, I am meant to serve you.
Mhm.
And yeah, having the courage for us, again, just kind of sharing my experience for those that might help, having the courage to say, no, that's who we're for. And if you read our website now, and it takes courage because you're worried, like, well, what about all the venues and the photographers that we do serve very willingly and gratefully? It's like they love it, but the branding on the website is all about Wendy Wedding Planner, right?
Mhm.
And leaning in on that took some courage, but wow, is it really helpful? Again, just speaking from my experience, now you're talking directly to somebody. When they show up on your website, their shoulders can relax and say, ah, this is for me.
Yeah.
So I couldn't resist just kind of sharing that in case it helps people. I don't know if I'm sure your hamster's turning out thoughts as I was talking.
Yeah, yeah, I love that example, and I was thinking about that too, even in my own business, like, it's kind of like the cobbler with shoes. It's really hard to do this for ourselves, and I have a copywriter I'm working with, to really get clearer, and she's asked me a lot of questions along the same lines of like, okay, I know that you say that you work with all creative businesses, but can we say that you just work with wedding pros? Are you okay with that? So that's
Yeah.
an example of like where I have to get more specific of like, yeah, I would love to help everyone and I can with my services. Both like the strategy, branding, and website design support a lot of different business owners. I usually say creative service providers, but if I'm just saying creative service providers, that's not
Yeah.
really speaking to
Yeah.
anyone. Like no one walks up to you at a networking event and is like, "Hi, I'm Emily. I'm a creative service
Yeah.
provider."
Exactly.
Yeah, so, getting more specific on that, and I think, we forget too that when you're working on your brand strategy and, like, rebranding your business or just trying to refresh your website even, you're aiming for the stars, like, you're aiming for that, like, perfect ideal client that I'm talking about, and again, we're not going to necessarily always book them 100% of the time, but you're imagining your most ideal business of, like, if you're working with the best client all the time, what does that look like? If you're selling your favorite package all the time, who's that
Yeah.
for? And I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of opportunity to, like, position yourself so that you're attracting your ideal client with that perfect package that you have. And then maybe your lower offers or like some other type of offer attract someone who's like halfway there. Like a good example is let's say that full service planning is what you want to sell. And so you're really trying to attract people who are just stressed out. They don't want to touch anything of the wedding. They really don't want to do anything besides maybe have to like sign some vendor contracts or something. And they're really more interested in just the aesthetics, giving their input maybe to mood boards, but they don't want to know any of the details. And maybe their budget is like at least $10,000 for the wedding planner. So you will still attract people who maybe don't have that $10,000 budget and who want to book your partial planning, or if you still do like day of coordination. But it doesn't mean that those people aren't aligned with that ideal client. They maybe just don't have the budget, or maybe they have a little bit more investment in the wedding and like really want to be a little bit more involved. So you can still talk to that person that you want to attract most of the time. And then I think it'll trickle down into people who have a similar mindset, but maybe they're just not fully there in the client journey yet.
As a wedding planner, you know how important it is to create detailed wedding day timelines for your events. But creating your timelines can be a tedious and time-consuming job. Until now. Because Timeline Genius lets you create beautiful, detailed wedding day timelines with ease. And it keeps everything you need on the wedding day in one central place. Here's how it works. First, Timeline Genius saves all your clients, vendors, and venues in your Rolodex, so you don't lose time looking for their information. And when you're ready to create a new timeline, you simply enter the key information for your wedding. Click a button, and voila! Timeline Genius magically gives you a customized timeline for your event, where all the details are laid out and the times are calculated for you. From there, you can easily edit your timeline by adding or deleting items, inserting images, changing font styles, and customizing everything to your liking. You can also instantly shift the times for as many items as you want. And when it comes to your clients and vendors, Timeline Genius lets you give them the highest level of service. You can send them tailored timelines, showing only the items they're involved in. And you can collaborate by inviting them to a mobile-friendly, web-based version of the timeline. You can even set text message reminders to automatically go out on the wedding day. And once you've completed your perfect timeline, you can download it or email it out as a beautifully styled PDF. And that's Timeline Genius, a smart software that will help take your wedding planning to the next level. Start your free trial today.
I love that, Emily. And so once you get this ideal client nailed down and you're bought into this idea that, as they say, niche down till it hurts.
Yeah.
Like you've got really specific on who, there's a really quick anecdote. Like I remember going to the store. I was having like a neck pain or something, and there was a product and it had the red spot, like a picture of kind of like a human, like with like the red spot right where my neck was hurting. I'm like, that's the product I need, not a general pain reliever. I was like, that's for me, right? Like, you don't want just an insecticide. If you have ants, you want like ant raid, right?
Mhm.
But let's say somebody's niche down till it hurts. How does this impact brand strategy? So let's say, Emily, that somebody is bought into um, this notion of documenting, really fleshing out their ideal client. How does this transition into or serve as kind of the foundation for building a sound brand strategy?
Yeah. So I loved the example that you had of the neck pain thing, because one thing I wanted to mention was how brand strategy is basically building a story. So you're talking about like storytelling and the way that you're going to communicate to your audience, not through necessarily marketing strategy yet. Like we're not talking, okay, I'm going to show up on TikTok and I'm going to write these kinds of captions, but we're talking about your brand voice and then your branding design of how you're going, like what you're going to say to your ideal clients, and then how you're going to show up visually and what that voice for your brand is going to be. So that's a key part of figuring out the ideal client kind of early in the brand strategy process, is like, okay, now how do we position you? There's a lot of elements in brand strategy, such as like market positioning. There's also brand archetypes, which are super fun, which is like your brand's personality, and thinking about less so the client now, but you're thinking about your own business of like, okay, what is my brand's personality? How do I communicate? What kind of value can I add to the ideal client? And then bringing that all together in a storytelling way of, I'm here as kind of the guide to help this person solve this problem. So I was mentioning something about like your neck pain because there's a book called Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller, if you've heard of it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
just
it's
gonna
like go to. I feel like it's like mentioning, it's like maybe this is sacrilegious, but it's like the Bible of brand strategy. So if
Is
you've
that
talked about brand strategy, you've probably heard of it. But that neck pain example is a perfect example of what he talks about in the book. And I mentioned this a little bit earlier too, like you can tell when someone's worked through their ideal client because they're no longer talking about themselves. They're instead talking more about the ideal client, like on their website and in all of their communications. And that's really what he says is your brand's not about you. It's about the ideal client. And you're just the guide helping the hero, which is your client, get to an end goal. So we have to figure out who the client is, obviously, which is your ideal client or like your client archetype. And then we have to figure out what your brand's personality is and how you're showing up in the story, like how you're going to catch their eye and what that pain point is that you need to help them kind of get over. So he talks a lot about like Harry Potter, Star Wars, all of these stories that we know and love, and how there's a guide, like let's say Hagrid in Harry Potter. He's not a huge part of the story, actually. It's about Harry, but Hagrid's helping him get to that end goal so that they can get to the end of the story. And basically Harry has a problem that he needs to overcome, and that's your client. They have a problem that they need to overcome. That's their pain point. And the solution is your value that you're bringing to the table. And it's not all of the gritty, nitty details of like, I offer these 20 things as part of this package, and you can pay me $7,200 for these things. But that's where we get into the feeling of that solution that you're offering of like, you're going to feel so relaxed. Your pain point is that you have no idea how to plan a wedding. That's totally normal because you've never done this before. And I've done this a million times. So I'm going to guide you through this process, and I'm going to help you just like take a deep breath and enjoy the wedding day and be present because you don't have to see anything behind the scenes. So it's getting them to that end point. That's kind of a complicated way of saying that's brand strategy. There's all of these different puzzle pieces to put together this story that becomes your brand strategy.
I love that. And absolutely love that book. It blew my mind. Anybody that hasn't read it, go get it. Donald Miller, yeah, he's really like, I think he had just a way of simplifying it, and kind of,
Yeah.
there are definitely aha moments just as I was reading that. So what are the benefits, Emily, of getting it right when it comes to brand strategy? Say I'm a wedding planner and I've gotten my brand strategy right. Like, what are the
Mhm.
benefits?
Yeah, I would say the biggest one is you're no longer throwing spaghetti at the wall. Like, a lot of people make the mistake of wanting to start with their marketing strategy because that's what you hear the most of like, okay, I need to post this, I need to write this blog post,
Yeah,
I need to make my website look nice. But it really comes down to your brand strategy first. You're just going to kind of be fumbling and trying different things, like following trends, following what this one coach says, but then this other coach says something different. So when you're clear on your brand strategy and you have that established, it takes out a lot of the guesswork. I would say that's the biggest thing. The next thing is, again, understanding your ideal client. It's not even about your marketing at that point, but even just the way that you show up in like your sales calls throughout the client process, like understanding what it is that you need to do and how you need to participate in the interaction to really get to the end goal and be the best business owner that you can be and the best support system to your client.
I love that. Yeah, and it really does. I think you kind of yeah, it's almost I feel like just experientially because I've been on both sides of the line where like I didn't feel like we had, and I don't want to come off like, oh, we've nailed it 100% A plus. Like branding is admittedly not my superpower, but it's something that if you're in business you have to learn something about, because you're going to have a brand regardless of whether or not you're intentionally fashioning it. Like
Yeah.
you're going to have a perception of who
Mic
and what.
drop there.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it just for me it kind of feels like when you get it right, you're kind of swimming with the current rather than swimming against it. So I think most people listening, Emily, will say, yeah, like obviously, yeah, branding's important. Having brand strategy and getting that right is valuable. Um, Getting into the how to's is, there's only so far I guess we can go, but I do want to give people some takeaways here, Emily. Like, let's say that they have done the work here to lean into your definition of the ideal client, they've documented it. what do they do now? Like they could just be like, look, I'm a wedding planner. Like, I mean, I know branding is important, but I don't even know which way's up in terms of how to craft and implement the right brand strategy. What should they do, Emily?
Yeah, I would say get into some research. So you can do that before you even necessarily develop your ideal client. But also, I think it's healthy to continue doing that after you've thought of your ideal client persona. So doing market research, both more about your clients and then their perceptions of you. So, like surveys are a great opportunity to do this, looking into testimonials from past clients and digging into like who you are as a business, and then also in market research analyzing your competitors and looking at like, okay, who is working with this kind of client, how are they showing up, and how could I show up differently but also kind of align myself in that way. So definitely not about copying or trying to follow trends or anything like that, but getting an idea of like, what is the caliber of this person that is attracting this client, and then how can I kind of like slide into that caliber but show up differently so that I'm not just in the sea of sameness. So that's a big part that you would want to kind of start exploring next. And that includes so much work, from your branding design, like how you can aesthetically be different, to the way that your brand voice is showing up, like on your website and everything. And then also a huge part is your packages, like the way that you're positioning your packages, your actual pricing. I think we forget that pricing is such a big part of your marketing and actually your brand strategy too, like the way that you're showing up. So you can get strategic there too. And again, not copying or following trends. So you don't have to like adjust your pricing just because this person works with that same kind of client and their price is like 8,000. So you have to charge 8,000. But think about like, what is the value there that your ideal client is needing? And also like your local market. Localness is obviously such a huge factor for most wedding planners. Even destination wedding planners usually still kind of have an area I noticed that they're typically planning weddings in. So getting clear of like what the expectations are there. So I would say market research, market positioning, in terms of your packages and your competitors. And then also you could get even more deep with it, depending on how deep you feel like you need to go to like really clarify. The end goal is to have your brand voice at the end of this and the story that you're telling to your clients. So you can always refine and hone in more. I wouldn't necessarily tell you to get so in the weeds with like a SWOT analysis and competitor analysis and all of that. But as far as you need to in order to get that clearness so that you're no longer throwing that spaghetti at the wall.
I'd love to get that's really cool and helpful, Emily. I'd love to get your 2 cents on something that when we were kind of revisiting our brand, a few years ago with Timeline Genius, something that we kind of ran into just practically and philosophically.
Mhm.
Um, we hear so many people say, and I love this sort of line of thought, that everybody's an individual. There never has been, never will be another me, right?
Yeah.
And we want to lean into that individuality rather than slipping into the sea of sameness, as I like that. I'm going to use that. But so on the one hand, there's kind of looking inside and seeing, who am I? What do I stand for? And putting that out into the world, right? On
Mhm.
the other hand, there's the complete opposite sort of perspective of not just kind of projecting me, my uniqueness, blah, 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 but rather knowing this is the ideal client that I'm trying to attract. Let me project the image that will draw that ideal client to me. Like,
Mhm.
how do you kind of reconcile those two sort of potentially conflicting? Or maybe the answer is they should be completely in alignment. I don't know, but they're not always completely in alignment for people. I don't know. Like, what's your sort of thinking as you craft brand strategy, leaning into like who you are and your individuality versus projecting what you know will attract your ideal client?
Yeah, I think I also want to add side note. I heard Sea of Sameness a long time ago, but I was reminded about it from a podcast episode I was listening to of Heidi Thompson's. So I
Oh,
don't know. She reminded me. I feel like I should give her some credit because I hadn't heard it in a while, and now
good things come from hiding.
yeah, it's
We
been on my mind. But I think that leaning into who you are as an individual and then attracting your ideal client, and like putting off that persona that you know that they need to hear in order to feel comfortable investing, I think it comes back to your ideal client and making sure that they are the kind of person that aligns with you and your unique personality to a certain extent. So another part of like figuring out your brand personality and client archetype is digging into what your special sauce is, what makes you stand out, and then figuring out like what kind of client appreciates that and how can I attract that client. So I think you don't necessarily have to figure out how to align them perfectly. I think it's almost like figuring out where in the market is that person and then like how can I align with them, and within reason. Like obviously you can get really specific with your personality and your uniqueness, like maybe you love, I don't know, like knitting cat sweaters or something. You're not going to necessarily find an ideal client that like wants a wedding planner that like knits cat sweaters. So like it's not finding someone who like loves every single detail about you, but it's figuring out like what is my vibe and the personality that I'm putting out there, and then how can that help them feel even better about investing in wedding planning. And then kind of taking away like all of the fluff and on your website like bringing out that part of your personality. So I would say like figuring out like what's special about you and then how to attract your ideal client with that, if that makes sense. Like it's very
Definitely.
intricate, and I know it changes like when you're working on your copywriting and your branding, like it's it can take a while like to basically like from sentence to sentence or from like every aspect of your branding design to really think back to the ideal client. But it's kind of a process you have to go through.
Yeah. Yeah, it really does all kind of stem from what we're saying there, that knowing like having the, taking the time, putting in the time and energy and having the courage to say, no, this is who I'm for. And just knowing there's so many people in the world now that even if you're niched down till it hurts, there's still going to be a lot of people that fit that really tightly defined niche. So there's one, and I remember this from Donald Miller's book. There's one really concrete thing that people can do that will start reaping, like letting them reap the benefits of having the right brand strategy. We did it with Timeline Genius. I'm going to segue into that in a moment. But first, I want to do just a quick aside, as I tend to do in these interviews, just to talk to our ideal client from Timeline Genius. I just want to tell people here, if you're a wedding planner and you're, doing wedding day timelines and you find them to be a tedious, time consuming process, if you've ever wished for a better, faster, easier way to do your timelines, please take a look at Timeline Genius. It really is an amazing tool, the best tool in the world. I say that very just humbly and objectively, just based on all of the users that we have now, the amazing planners that use our software and vendors. But again, we're leaning in here too. This is a topic about ideal client. Like, I know who our ideal client is. If you're, serious about your business, you're doing 15 plus weddings a year, you're going to do backflips and come hug me when you get set up on Timeline Genius. So just go to timelinegenius.com, watch the teaser video there on the homepage, do a free trial. We are so fanatical about customer support, and it literally does like we've spent 10 years building this AI just for wedding day timeline. So you can put in the religious tradition, the ceremony time, travel times, and it generates instantly this detailed, tailor-made template for your wedding. You can shift 50 items 10 minutes ahead. You can collaborate, set text reminders. It's really, really amazing. So timelinegenius.com, check it out, start a free trial. So with that, Emily, I kind of teased a very concrete thing that Donald Miller talks about that we did, and that is creating your website.
Mm-hmm.
Once you are creating, but getting your website right. And you can only, I think, do that when you have your ideal client. So
Yeah.
with the time we have left, I want to segue into the X's and O's of creating a great website. I know you have a freebie that we're going to give away, but also just talk to me about like, okay, so we did what you said, Emily. We got our ideal client. We've done this customer research. We know who we're serving, the right language to use. How do I leverage my website now that I'm empowered with the right brand strategy?
Yeah, I like to say that there's 5 pillars of a successful website, and it starts with a brand strategy. So now that we have that done, that's great. And then we have copywriting, and then branding design. It depends on how you work in order, but branding design and copywriting usually come into place like around the same time, like establishing your brand voice and your brand visuals around the same time, and then content and SEO. And those all, believe it or not, come back to your brand strategy too. So content is like your images, anything that's not your copywriting on your website, like imagery, blogging. People often think blogging is your copywriting, but it's more content writing. And then your SEO, even though it's very technical, that still comes back to your brand strategy too. So, looking at those four next pillars, you can't do branding design without brand strategy. And that's kind of the hill that I'll die on. There's a lot of designers out there, like, kind of saying that you can. And that's like maybe my unpopular opinion, but you really need brand strategy. If you are going to just start with your logos, again, you're just throwing spaghetti at a wall. And I think you're going to start blending in with the rest of the people around you. So, getting clear on your brand visuals, logos, colors, typography, other brand assets like icons and patterns, just extensions of those visuals so that you can be really cohesive across your website are essential. And then also the other ways that you're showing up outside of your website, like maybe it's like Canva templates, your welcome guide, client gifts, things like that, making sure that every single touch point of your brand goes back to that brand strategy of how you want to make your ideal client feel. So we're thinking about mostly on your website how we're going to be speaking with your future ideal client, right? Like how you're going to attract that person. But then I also like to ask during the brand strategy process of like, how do you want your client to feel at the end of working with you too? Because we want to make sure that that kind of experience is expressed throughout your branding design of making sure, like, I use an example of like, what would your perfect testimonial sound like? Like, other than them saying like, oh, they did a great job, like, we're so happy with our wedding, like, what kind of special sentence would make you different from a competitor of yours? And you really want to hear that in your testimonial because it matters to you that your clients are getting that experience. So that's something that I think about too in the branding design process. And then the copywriting process sometimes comes simultaneously. I always recommend also working with a professional copywriter if possible. But I also have like a copy guide that I'll walk my clients through if they are DIYing their copy. And we'll talk about brand keywords, which aren't SEO keywords, but they're like specific wording that you're going to use in your brand. And then also voices that you'll kind of stray away from. So, like keywords that you don't want to use that don't sound like your brand, and getting clear in the visuals and the voice kind of at the same time. And then content stems from that. That's like more like your marketing strategy of like, okay, based on this, that the brand voice that we've established and the aesthetic, like how can we have that show up on our website? So, for example, you've established your brand strategy and the design is done. So now, how can we make that show up uniquely in our brand photography on our website? Or what kind of portfolio pieces do we need to pull to kind of display that feeling that we're putting across on our website? And then on the blogging side, like, okay, we understand our brand voice. So, what kind of tone do blogs need to be written in? And what kind of problems are we trying to solve with these pieces of free content? And then your SEO is the last part of thinking through what kind of experience you want people to have on your website. So when we've thought through the website design itself, how can we use that to better the SEO and help the right people to find you and get traffic that way?
What's the biggest mistake you see people make in our industry, Emily, when it comes to websites? If you just had to point to a couple of just real pitfalls, you're like, there it is again, like something that just kind of just for you just strikes you as commonplace.
Yeah. Big picture on the kind of strategy side of just talking about themselves too much.
Mm,
Technical, like things that you could fix in a minute. Having an ugly mobile site, I would say, is a big one. And
mm,
having a dysfunctional contact page, like a contact form that either doesn't work well or is too long or too vague or short. And then also, this was something I didn't mention earlier, but one motivation of starting my business was that I was in the midst of wedding planning for myself. So one thing that I saw was just a lot of phone numbers and emails not being clickable. I was on so many mobile sites and just unable to reach people through their
wow.
website because of those like dysfunctional contact pages.
Wow. Really interesting. What's another pitfall you've seen people just kind of step in? I love that one. It's so like kind of specific and you
Yeah.
know, I'm sure somebody now is like, wait a minute, let me go check my contact page. Is there
Yeah.
anything else see sometimes just like people just maybe they're just busy and not thinking about it, but like another pitfall that you people see people fall into with their websites.
Yeah, not showing their face is one, or sometimes like not even sharing their name, especially if your agency or like your business is behind a business name. So
Yeah.
not like it's kind of difficult when you don't even know who you're going to be talking with on a sales call. Um,
Yeah.
and I think it almost sometimes gets worse, like not to call anyone out, but like with wedding planners, I almost feel like once wedding planners start getting a team sometimes, it's even harder to tell who you're actually going to talk with because
Yeah.
sometimes people hide behind the team a little bit, but they're still maybe the ones doing the sales. So that is something I see a lot of just not knowing the human behind the brand. And I think that's my biggest tip is like showing that human.
Yeah.
You want people to see who you are. Obviously, you don't want to talk about yourself too much, but you definitely should talk about yourself on your website and should show up that way. So that's a pitfall. Definitely the mobile is the biggest thing.
That rings out for me. I mean, we yeah, when somebody signs up, and especially like as a wedding planner, it's such a direct reflection of you. Like
Yeah.
you're the one rendering the service, you're the person they're going to be interacting with. Sometimes like I'll go on a site and I just want to, who is this person, like and yeah, that doesn't necessarily pop. Is there one more just to round it out with a trio, Emily? Is there
Yeah.
another sort of concrete and specific mistake that you see some people unwittingly step into, like or make?
Yeah. I think not having enough quality content. The biggest side of that I see is just wedding pros not having enough content on their website. So, like, for
Mm,
example, I'll see a venue and like the only picture that they have maybe is just the front of the venue and there's just nothing else there.
yeah,
And then same with copywriting too. Like, there just won't be a huge explanation of what you do and like kind of who you're for and everything. And then the other side of that is people sometimes put so much content that it's overwhelming and I can't find what I need. Like, I think a big mistake there is like wedding planners and photographers who just put all of their weddings up. Like, there's like 20 galleries and there's 50 photos from each gallery. And in reality, people aren't taking that much time to look through everything most of the time. So it's better to showcase your best work. So yeah, too much not enough useful content, I guess I would say, to paraphrase that.
So what's the what do I just thinking about the copy for the moment? What do I want people to think when they're done reading the copy on my website? Like what am I trying to accomplish? Maybe we could just say, "Oh, it's to get them to book me." But I think, going a little like a couple rungs deeper, like what are the triggers that I need to pull or the buttons I need to push to get somebody to, I mean, presumably my website is serving as a 24/7 sales agent for my company,
Mhm.
right? Such that, like, I mean, I don't expect if I'm a wedding planner, nobody's putting their billing information in online. So it's not going to complete the sale for me. So I guess kind of backing into this, practically speaking, the goal of my website is to get somebody to make that inquiry, right?
Mhm.
And if so, what does my copy need to do from your vantage point, Emily, in order to get accomplish that goal of getting somebody to make that inquiry?
Yeah, it needs to just make that person feel like this person understands me. And I think like I'm going to be seen and safe with this person. I think that's that biggest gap between landing on your website and the sales call is they don't want to get on a sales call if they feel like they're going to be sold to or if they feel like their time's going to be wasted or even if they just feel like it's going to be just a bunch of information thrown at them. Like that's obviously the point of the sales call is to give them the final information to get them to book with you. But I think a lot of clients, especially for wedding planners, they're looking for that sales call to be like a helpful, resourceful call where they
Mhm.
feel comfortable and they understand that like you're basically their friend through the process.
Well, so okay, so this is interesting, and I know a lot of planners that will say to me, and I'm sure people hearing this will be people nodding their heads. If I can just get somebody on that call, if I can get that meeting,
Mhm.
there's a very high likelihood of my closing,
Yeah.
uh, booking them as a client. I just want to highlight, and I don't know if you did this intentionally or if maybe there's more to kind of unpack here, but it's very interesting to me that you did not say the button my website needs to push in order to get the inquiry is to make them think that I'm an amazing wedding planner. I mean, maybe that just kind of goes without saying, but like, it's interesting. I feel like you jumped to this like deeper sort of interpersonal like thing. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, what do you think? Like, how important is it for me to convey, I'm going to be great at planning your wedding? Like, I mean, it's just, yeah, just to kind of push on that, probe on that a little bit.
Yeah, I feel like this is gonna maybe sound blunt, but, like, if you're charging a high-end price, you don't need to tell people that you're an amazing wedding planner. Like, if your work shows it on your website and people are finding you maybe through word of mouth or through SEO or something, your branding and your work will already speak to the fact that you're an amazing wedding planner.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
So I asked you specifically about the copy,
Yeah,
and you're saying the copy serves one, but the images and other sort of like, yeah, the content, like more broadly speaking, which is like images, video, whatever, those things need to do that Donald Miller sort of aspirational, like you're
yeah,
showing the images that are evoking, like, this is what I want my wedding to be. And
yeah.
this person, she or he is amazing. Is that kind of the
Yeah,
distinction?
definitely. Yeah, and I think also it varies by your ideal client too, right? Like, so kind of going back, I know not everyone listening is necessarily charging high-end prices. And when I say high-end, I'm thinking like you're doing like percentage pricing or maybe your full service starts at 10,000 or something like that. But especially if you're in that market, part of your ideal client persona is most likely they're looking at a bunch of amazing wedding planners. They don't need to be proven that you are amazing at what you do. They know it when they reach out. Like, they're already looking for that caliber. So they don't need you to remind them like, I'm an amazing wedding planner. That's like where you need to kind of pivot and say, this is how I stand out from the other amazing wedding planners. Like, you've seen my work. It's already like a no-brainer that I can do the job, but how I do it is how I'm going to be different than the other people that you're looking at.
Wow. Really, really interesting. And so the copy is where I'm going to be kind of showing more of my individuality. This is me. This
Mhm.
is what's unique about me. I'm kind of putting that image of myself out that I think is going to attract my ideal client. Is that what I'm
Yeah.
hearing?
Yeah, definitely, and it's kind of back to that, point that I was making earlier of, like, it's about them, not about you, so it's, like, not kind of yelling to the masses of, like, "This is me, I do this amazing work, you can trust me." It's more like, "Here's how I'm going to fit into your wedding, day, and then, like, what I can offer you and, like, the end result that you'll feel with me." So I truly don't believe that people need to be proven that you can do the job and that your work is quality. I think that should show up through your work and through your marketing, and like word of mouth and your reputation and everything, which is a big part of your branding. But I think the key is to really talk about like how you stand out in terms of the approach that you take to your work and what you can offer them, because you're not just checking a box. And I think the end goal, like you were saying, is to get them on a sales call and they like everyone can kind of get people on a sales call, I think, by showing that they have good work. But then it's kind of like you want them to think in the back of their mind, okay, this person is different than those other two people that I also booked calls with because they see me. And maybe all three of these wedding planners charge the same price and they all provide amazing work. But I already feel really connected with this person because their copy was already talking about how they don't do traditional weddings and I don't want a traditional wedding. And kind of that
Um,
aspect because I really feel like the quality of your work is similar to pricing. Like, yeah, you do want it to be aligned with your ideal client, but you can only compete so much with the quality of your work. Like, you're going to continue to advance your skills, but at the end of the day, there's always going to be someone more talented than you. You're always going to be more talented than other people in your industry too, but you can only compete so much on that, if that makes sense.
it really does. And it also makes sense that, like, look, if you're not doing great work, there's no lipstick we're going to put on that pig to make it win the beauty contest, right? Like, that's the foundation. You have to be doing great work, and the X's and O's of doing great work as a wedding planner are, the subject for another podcast episode.
Yeah.
But assuming that you're doing that great work, which is going to get you the word of mouth and the reputation, all of that, what is the objective of the copy on your site? And it's to build this. It kind of makes me think of my neck pain image again,
Yeah.
where this is for me. Like, this is the thing. Like, I am for you. You want a non-traditional wedding. Like, this is the thing. So I guess my sort of last question on website, and I have just another sort of hot seat question that I ask of
Mm.
every interviewee, would just be, we talked about sort of the pitfalls, Emily. Um, Tell me one thing that you see, like, because I know you've seen websites for various people in our industry, something that you've seen where you're like, wow, this website for this wedding industry pro is singing. Like, they are, wow, they're doing this right. Tell me an example of something that like you see and you're like, ah, that's the way to do this.
Yeah, I would say creating a really interactive experience on your website. Like when you get to it and there's no clutter in the sense of like everything kind of just makes sense and it falls together in terms of the design and the branding. And it's very clear where I'm supposed to go next. So something I didn't mention earlier was call to actions, but like it's very clear how I can contact them and they make it very clear what they want me to do. I think that is something that really sets a website apart is when the user experience is just so clean and it's very easy for the person to understand what to do. And it's kind of like I'm just being guided to this end goal. Like I don't feel overwhelmed about what to do next.
I love that. What a nice high sort of level place to kind of leave off with that. I have another question. Well, this time has really flown by. I
Yeah.
have a question, as you know, because you've listened to an episode or two of our podcast. I have another question that I always ask of our guests, which is if you could give one piece of advice to everybody listening right now, Emily, based on your experience, knowing that we're all just trying really hard, working hard to build our businesses that would be as helpful as possible to them, what advice would you share?
Yeah, I would say to not be afraid to show up as the unique human that you are behind the brand. Whether that's through actually naming your business after yourself, or even if you have like a business name and a team, like not being afraid to show your personality through your marketing and your branding, and then also like throughout the client experience. Because, especially as a wedding planner, you have this unique opportunity to be kind of like your client's best friend through the process and there's just so much room for you to show that unique personality that you have.
That's really beautiful, Emily. And it's funny. That's something that it's one of those just really, really deep core things that I've heard. And it comes because everybody's got different experiences. You hear it in different ways, shapes, and forms. But just this notion that like you're unique, lean into that. That is really beautiful. Emily, you said you also have a freebie for our listeners. I'd love to have you describe that freebie, tell people how to take advantage of it, and also how they can get in touch with you if they want to learn more about you and possibly work with you.
Yeah. So I know we didn't get into so much nitty gritty, but this freebie hopefully will help you some more with that. If you go to emilyfostercreative.com/, elevated website checklist, I can give you the link. I have a 20 action item checklist to help you think both big picture and then action items on your website. I think about the first 5 to 10 things are kind of these big picture things that we've talked about, advice for like how to start curating the experience on your website more. And then the next 10 are like true action items of things that you could update within a couple hours on your website. So that will kind of help you get started, whether you want to do it on your own or if you want to get kind of a head start before reaching out to someone like me. If you want to reach out to work together, I'm at emilyfostercreative.com. And you can also email me at hello@emilyfostercreative.com. And then brand consistency, I'm Emily Foster Creative on Pinterest, Instagram, and Facebook if you want to find me there.
I love that, Emily. And what do you give to people that, if they hire you, what is it that they get by working with you?
Yeah, you get a really hands-on experience that I like to say it's hands-on, but not a lot of commitment for you in terms of time. So we go through a brand strategy process no matter what kind of package you book with me when we work one-on-one. And that's usually anywhere from one to a couple calls to talk through your brand strategy. It's less so a lot of forms, but more like actually talking through things together and kind of having a coach through that process. And then you get really tailored, customized branding and website design. I tend to work with a platform called Show It. So even if we're starting with like a template, you still get a really unique website, and it's not meant to feel blocky or cliche. I also don't focus on one style. I think that's something that I offer to my clients is you don't just come to me for a boho style or like luxury black and white kind of style. We really focus on your brand strategy first and then bring your vision to life through that strategy in whatever style actually makes sense for you and your ideal client. So I
I
do
love
that through a few different ways. I have website templates, website refreshes, custom branding and website design. Typically kind of curate the package based on what the client needs.
That's great. Yeah, I just didn't want to get off. We talked a lot about, just you kind of sharing the pearls of wisdom and me kind of extracting valuable information from your mind. I want people to know that, you don't necessarily have to do it all yourself.
Yeah.
Sometimes the answer is who, not how. I understand sometimes like you may not have resources to invest in these things now, but for those that do and that want to tap into your expertise more directly, I wanted them to know what you do. So Emily, thank you so much for being here, for doing this. I really appreciate you just taking the time to share your knowledge and expertise with our community.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. This has really been so much fun. And yeah, feel free to reach out if you have questions. Thanks, Eddie.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Emily.